Boy, do we have an absolute roller coaster of a ride type of video because Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk just couldn't quite help himself and tossed out an absolutely wild, insane, bonkers idea to reprimand and punish the cheating Falcons for tampering with Kirk Cousins, which, by the way, Florio has already deemed he is the judge, jury, and executioner. Atlanta's guilty. So let's unpack what was a tweet that led to an article from Mike Florio, the face behind Pro Football Talk, where he said, last year the NFL dropped an unexpected Cardinals-Eagles tampering settlement just before the draft started. This year, could the same thing happen as to the Falcons' blatant tampering with former Vikings QB Kirk Cousins? Now, I should add, Mike Florio is a Minnesota Vikings fan, and I think that really comes through in this article. I do think he has some good points. There's a lot of factual points made, but at the end, it's quite the ending. I think you just want to say, stick around and see for it yourself. So let's get right into it. Here's what Florio wrote. The Falcons tampering with quarterback Kirk Cousins as proven by the things Cousins said during his introductory press conference. The NFL is investigating. If the NFL is serious about getting to the truth, an investigation that makes the blatant tampering even more clear should not require many steps. I'll give Florio that. I think there's a good chance that there was some tampering going on. Now, I'm not going to stand here and act like this is a unique thing to Atlanta. I'm sure there's some level of tampering that happens, I wouldn't say with every single team every year, but I think it's a little bit like before NIL got approved in college football. Who wasn't putting cash in McDonald's bags in players' locker rooms? That couldn't just be a Tennessee thing. So Florio is getting a little upset. All right, we continue on. The question becomes whether and to what extent the Falcons will be punished. Some think the presence of Rich McKay on the competition committee will get the Falcons a pass. Obviously, that shouldn't be the case. When I read that, the first thing that came to my mind is like Rich McKay is like one of the kooks from Outer Banks. And it's kind of fun to have a kook on your side because it gets you out of shit a little bit. So I'm not going to throw a hissy fit over it. Right now, Florio just kind of, he's coming across as a third grader playing AYSO soccer that doesn't care for the play-on rule, and they want justice, and they want it now. So Florio is really getting his feels about this because he's upset that Minnesota's quarterback Kirk Cousins left the Vikings for Atlanta. And I think it's very evident that Florio would have preferred Cousins to stay with his Minnesota Vikings. We continue on. However, they did get less of a punishment for pumping fake crowd noise into the Georgia Dome than the 49ers received for a simple accounting error. Given the manner in which the NFL handled last year's tampering by the Cardinals with former Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon, let me stop you right there. Let's break down some of these other tampering situations that have happened across the league. So the most recent one, relevant, similar, let's put it that way, to Atlanta would be what happened in Miami with the Dolphins tampering with Tom Brady. So a quarterback, right? That's the comparison to the Falcons. And Sean Payton, it was much more egregious, much more extensive, and prolonged than what happened with the Falcons and Kirk Cousins, allegedly. Miami was stripped of their first-round pick last year, third-round pick this year, and their owner, Ross, was fined $1.5 million. Now, that's on the extremes of what could happen. Atlanta did not commit nearly, if at all, the types of violations that the Dolphins did. That much is certain. Now, if we want to go back in history a little bit, when the Falcons were pumping in fake crowd noise, allegedly, into the Georgia Dome, they were fined $350,000 and stripped of a fifth-round draft pick in 2016. And then the accounting error, I don't know if you guys saw this in the news about a month and change ago. The 49ers had a simple accounting error in their books for the salary cap. It didn't change the salary cap for them. Like, they weren't, above the cap, and this put them below the cap. They were always below the cap. It's just by how much. So some nerd over in Palo Alto screwed up for them, and they had to move. They have to move back in the 4th round of this year to the end of the comp line, and they lost their 5th-round pick next year. So, I mean, he says that this is worse than what the Falcons had. Atlanta lost a 5th and $350,000. The 49ers are losing a 5th, and they're going back a grand total of 4 spots in round number 4. But we do have what happened almost a year ago that Florio is using as precedent. And I think it's fair precedent to use, which is the Jonathan Gannon tampering. When the Cardinals picked up the Eagles defensive coordinator as their head coach, there were some phone calls that happened before they should have happened. And before the draft, the NFL, I think, kind of just sat down Arizona and Philadelphia and said, you guys come to a resolution you deem fair. And that was the Cardinals and the Eagles swapping 3rd-round picks. So Arizona went from 66 back to 94, and the Cardinals picked up a 5th-round pick from the Philadelphia Eagles. So in trade value terms, this kind of equates to the Eagles gaining a 3rd-round pick, right? They go from 94 to 66. They lose a 5th-rounder as a result, and everyone shakes hands and moves on. So this is what Florio is really driving home. Let's see what he says. It's impossible to rule out an announcement that drops just before the 1st round of the draft. The Falcons have the 8th pick in round 1. The Vikings have the 11th. What if the punishment is as simple as the Falcons and Vikings flip-flopping the 2 picks? This is not happening. This is Mike Florio trying to put this out into the universe, hoping someone from the league comes across this, thinks, that's not a half bad idea. How about we do that? No. It's a little bit different when you go 3rd-round pick swap to 1st-round pick swap. I think this is just butthurt Mike Florio. This is Mike Florio, a Vikings fan, upset that his quarterback went to a different team, and he's going to have a temper tantrum over it, and he's going to try and get a draft pick out of the Atlanta Falcons in the top 10. No. They are not swapping the 8th and the 11th overall pick. And I'm not even saying that from a standpoint of that's unfair, like that's so egregious. No, I'm not agreeing to, I'm not condoning this or giving it my stamp of approval because Mike Florio is not coming from a standpoint of this is fair. He's coming from a standpoint of I'm a Vikings fan and I'm pissed that Kirk Cousins is no longer a Viking. If someone else who had no horse in this race and had no emotional tie to either team came up with this idea, you know what? Maybe that's something I could go, that may be fair. If you go from 8 to 11, it's the equivalent of a 3rd-round pick. So it's not the most lopsided punishment I've ever seen. But when it comes from a Vikings fan, I'm just going to immediately go like, no, you're not coming from a standpoint of this is in everyone's best interest. You're coming from a standpoint of I'm pissed and I want to get revenge. Now, this is where I can really say with confidence Mike Florio is not coming from a neutral standpoint. At the end of his article, he said, the end result could and perhaps should be that the Vikings will have the 8th and 23rd picks, which makes their potential effort to trade up into the top 5 a little easier. Or maybe they'll just stay put at 8 and wait for a quarterback they like to fall from them. I mean, this is just blatant. I have my Vikings glasses on. I am trying to put this out into the universe to help my Minnesota Vikings move up and get not Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or J.J. McCarthy. He's not even trying to hide it at this point. Like, Florio, I think, puts out, a lot of content, and he's very knowledgeable on the league. He's a really intelligent guy and whatnot, but every once in a while he goes a little bit into the Alice in Wonderland storyline of like, what the fuck are you doing over there, dude? And now he's down quite the rabbit hole of what could I do to make my life easier as a Vikings fan to get my quarterback? I know, we'll just swap picks with Atlanta. And then we can move up with the Cardinals or the Patriots because going from 3 or 4 to 8 is a lot softer of a fall than going all the way to 11. So no, because Florio comes in with such bias, I'm just going to shoot it down right now. But what are your thoughts on the entire proposal idea Mike Florio cooked up? Like, I think there is something coming for Atlanta. It's hard for me to say if it should be something worth a third-round pick because I don't know exactly what they were guilty of just yet. If we get all the findings afterwards and we know exactly what happened or allegedly happened, then maybe we can figure out, based on precedent, what would be a fair trade value compensation loss. But just waltzing in here before you knowing what the NFL has learned from their investigation and going, we'll take pick number 8 off your hands, no big deal. Yeah, I'm going to say no thank you. All right, that will do it for us on this edition of Falcons Today. Get back to watching the Masters, and I'll see you all later.